My name is Jessica Sterling. I'm 32 years old. The afternoon my bank account was frozen, my sister didn't ask if I was okay. She screamed at me to sell my car to pay for her luxury wedding venue. My mom nodded like that was a normal demand. My dad walked over, grabbed my suitcase, and threw it into the freezing rain right in front of our aunt, in front of the neighbor watching from her window. He said my sister needed my room for her gifts. I stood on that wet porch holding 10 years of secretly saving his factory, and none of it mattered. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I held the master keys. But by the time their cards declined, I was already the CEO. Before I take you back to that exact moment their fake world crumbled, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it there? It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when my world flipped upside down. Not because of a corporate layoff, but because of a glowing red message on my phone screen. Essay frozen. I was sitting in a quiet local diner, the smell of burnt coffee in the air, staring at a declined receipt for a $4 meal. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I immediately dialed Grant Whitaker, my trusted lawyer and secret business partner. "Grant, the bank locked my accounts," I whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Is it because of the buyout?" Grant sighed, his voice calm and steady. "Yes, Jess, the massive trust fund your great-aunt Clara transferred is triggering international security checks. It will clear in exactly 48 hours. The secret buyout of your dad's failing manufacturing company is still perfectly safe." I took a deep breath, the cold diner air chilling my skin. "I just have to survive 2 days without my family finding out," I told him. Instead of driving to my own apartment, I drove to our family home in Crestwood. The heavy rain battered the windshield of my 5-year-old sedan. I pulled into the driveway and counted the cars. My parents' brand new luxury SUV, Aunt Pamela's rusty minivan, Mrs. Donovan's car from next door, and a bright red sports car belonging to Melissa's fiancé, Brad. The front porch was already decorated with white silk ribbons. Melissa's extravagant wedding was only 3 weeks away. 4 cars meant company. Company meant an audience. I dragged my tired feet onto the wet wooden porch. The heavy oak door was slightly open, and before I could even take off my dripping coat, Melissa stomped into the hallway. "Your credit card declined at the Oakwood Country Club," she screamed. She was clutching a bridal magazine, her face twisted in pure anger. "The venue manager called me. Do you know how humiliating that was?" I stood there, freezing rain dripping from my hair onto the expensive Persian rug. "My account is temporarily locked for a security check, Melissa," I said softly. "I can fix it in a couple of days." My mother, Laura Sterling, marched out of the fancy kitchen, aggressively wiping her hands on a towel. "A couple of days is entirely too late, Jessica," my mother snapped. Her tone wasn't worried, it was completely heartless. "Melissa's dream venue needs the $15,000 final deposit by tomorrow morning. You need to sell your car today to cover it." I stared at them, the smell of baked ziti from the kitchen suddenly making me feel sick. "Sell my car?" I asked, my voice shaking. "How will I get to my job?" Melissa rolled her eyes, crossing her arms like a spoiled child. "Take the city bus. This is my wedding, Jess. Stop being so selfish. Let me take you back, because this toxic greed didn't grow overnight." When I was 22, my beloved Grandma Rose passed away. Before she died, she made me promise to keep the family together. My father, Richard, was a proud but foolish man, running the family's 3rd-generation manufacturing company straight into a mountain of secret debt. While my parents spoiled Melissa with expensive vacations and designer bags, I was the one secretly paying the bills. Over the last decade, I had silently drained my own savings, nearly $350,000, to pay the house mortgage and keep my father's business from going bankrupt. But Grandma Rose had a secret. She knew my father would ruin the family empire. So, she left a massive multi-million-dollar trust fund entirely to her sister, my great-aunt Clara. Great-aunt Clara was a fierce, sharp-minded woman who loved me deeply, seeing my silent struggles when no one else did. Just 2 months ago, while sitting beside Great-aunt Clara's hospital bed after her mild heart attack, she held my hand. "Jessica," she wheezed, her fragile fingers gripping mine with surprising strength, "your father is destroying the legacy. I am releasing your grandmother's trust fund to you now. We are going to secretly buy out the company from under him. You will be the sole owner." I kept it a total secret, knowing my parents would force me to drain the trust fund for Melissa's lavish lifestyle. Now, standing in the cold hallway, my mother stepped closer. "If you won't sell your car to help your own sister, then you are no longer acting like part of this family," she declared coldly. Aunt Pamela and Mrs. Donovan peeked out from the living room. Pamela looked down at the floor, too terrified of my mother to defend me. Then my father, Richard, walked heavily down the stairs. He didn't look me in the eye. Instead, he picked up my small travel suitcase that I always kept packed for business trips. Without a single word, he opened the front door and tossed my suitcase right out onto the soaking wet porch. "Your sister and Brad need a place to store their expensive wedding gifts," my father muttered, his voice empty of any love. "She deserves the master bedroom now. You can sleep on the broken sofa in the basement until you figure your attitude out." I stood frozen. I looked at my suitcase lying in the freezing rain. I thought about the massive trust fund sitting safely in my frozen account. I thought about the company buyout papers sitting on Grant's desk, ready to be finalized. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. "Okay," I whispered calmly. I turned around and walked out into the rain, because I knew something they didn't. In exactly 24 hours, every single one of their company credit cards was going to decline. The freezing rain was coming down in sheets as I slammed the trunk of my old sedan. My suitcase was soaked, and so was my heart. For 10 years I had poured every ounce of my energy into keeping my father's manufacturing plant afloat. I had paid their mortgage, I had funded their luxury cars, and my reward was being tossed out into the storm so my sister's wedding gifts could have a nicer room. Instead of driving to a cheap motel or sitting alone in a gas station parking lot to cry, I drove straight to the wealthy, quiet edge of town. I pulled up to the towering iron gates of Great Aunt Clara's massive, silent estate. The gates slowly swung open, recognizing my car. As I walked into her grand foyer, the smell of burning cedar from the fireplace instantly warmed my shivering body. Clara was waiting in the drawing room, wrapped in a thick wool shawl. Even at 82, she sat perfectly straight, her sharp gray eyes missing nothing. She didn't offer me empty pity or ask if I was okay. She knew exactly what had happened. Instead, she reached into her pocket and slid a heavy silver keychain and a black CEO security badge across the mahogany coffee table. "It is done, Jessica," Clara said, her voice raspy but full of iron. "The final paperwork went through an hour ago. The Sterling Manufacturing Company is legally yours. You are the sole owner now. But I am not giving you this empire without a condition." She leaned forward, her eyes piercing through me. "Your father and his cronies have bled this company dry. The reserve funds attached to your new CEO account are locked. You have exactly 30 days to turn this factory into a profitable entity. If you fail, the board will liquidate everything, and the workers lose their jobs anyway. The clock starts tomorrow." I picked up the black badge. It felt incredibly heavy, but the ticking clock gave me a sudden, breathless rush of adrenaline. I didn't have time to mourn my family. I had a war to win. For years I had worked in a tiny, windowless cubicle at the back of my father's office, running the accounting department while he took all the credit and spent all the profits. Nobody at the company knew I was the one keeping the lights on. Nobody asked why I stayed late every single night to balance the budget. Nobody asked me anything unless it involved a dollar sign. Suddenly my phone buzzed in my wet coat pocket. It was a text from my father, Richard. It wasn't an apology. It read, "Don't bother coming into the office tomorrow, Jessica. Your toxic attitude is bad for morale right now. Take the week off unpaid until you agree to sell your car and fund your sister's venue." I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. He was firing me from my own company. He just didn't know it was mine yet. A moment later, Grant called. "Jess," he said, the excitement clear in his voice. "The bank just confirmed the timeline. The international security hold on your trust fund will lift tomorrow at exactly 10 a.m. I closed my eyes, doing the mental math. "Grant, 10 a.m. is the exact time my father's corporate credit cards and vendor accounts automatically process for the month." "Exactly," Grant replied. "And since the company is officially in your name, I have redirected all the corporate funds into your new secure master account. When your father tries to run his company cards tomorrow, there will be absolutely nothing there." That night, I didn't sleep. I spent the hours wrapped in a thick blanket in Clara's sprawling, dusty library. I wasn't crying over my father throwing me out. The shock of that had faded into something much colder. I was sitting on the floor, staring at a stack of secret financial ledgers Clara had managed to uncover during the buyout. As I ran my finger down the columns of numbers, my breath hitched. My chest tightened until it felt like it might crack. My father wasn't just struggling with normal business debt. He had been secretly and illegally draining the factory workers' pension fund to pay for Melissa's extravagant $100,000 wedding. He wasn't acting alone. The ledgers proved he was working with Elias Thorne, our slick, arrogant chief financial officer. Together, they were funneling the workers' retirements through fake consulting fees directly into my mother's offshore accounts. He was stealing from the hardworking men and women who had trusted our family for decades, all to pay for ice sculptures and a designer dress for my spoiled sister. If I hadn't stepped in with Clara's help, the workers would have lost everything. My mother never once asked how the company was surviving. My father never once admitted he was drowning. Melissa never once cared where the money came from, as long as it kept flowing into her manicured hands. Sitting in that grand library, the last tiny piece of guilt I had about cutting them off vanished completely. I wasn't just taking my life back. I was saving the innocent people my family was willing to destroy. The storm raged outside all night, but inside I was perfectly calm. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., the illusion of the Sterling family wealth was going to shatter. The sun barely peeked over the horizon on Wednesday morning, painting the gray sky in cold, bruised colors. Instead of driving to a gas station to cry over cardboard boxes, I drove straight to the Sterling manufacturing headquarters. I parked my wet, old sedan right in the reserved spot marked CEO. I walked up to the heavy glass doors at exactly 7 a.m. Old Marcus, the security guard who had worked there for 20 years, looked up in surprise. But Marcus wasn't just a guard. For the last 6 months, he had been my secret informant, quietly sliding me the floor manager's real production reports when Elias tried to hide them. "Morning, Jessica. You're here early. And why are you using the master scanner?" he asked. I smiled warmly, scanning the heavy black badge Clara had given me. The light flashed a solid, bright green. "Good morning, Marcus. Things are going to be a little different from now on," I said softly. "They're upstairs, aren't they?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Elias and your father. They snuck a foreign liquidation investor in through the back door 20 minutes ago. They're trying to sell off the machines." I didn't walk to my cramped windowless cubicle in the back. Instead, I took the private elevator straight to the top floor. My heart was racing, pounding a war drum against my ribs. I didn't knock. I pushed open the double oak doors of my father's lavish corner office. The room smelled of expensive leather and arrogant pride. Elias Thorne jumped, spilling his espresso, while my father was literally holding a pen over a massive liquidation contract. The foreign investor looked utterly confused. "Meeting is over," I announced, my voice slicing through the room like a razor. My father's face turned purple. "Jessica, I told you were suspended." "Security," he bellowed. Elias sneered, stepping toward me. "Listen to your father, little girl. We are conducting executive business." I didn't flinch. I slammed the stack of fake consulting invoices directly onto the liquidation contract. "Your executive business is embezzlement, Elias. And as of 6 a.m. today, I am the sole owner and CEO of this company. This sale is dead." I turned to the pale investor. "I suggest you leave before the federal auditors arrive in 5 minutes." The investor scrambled out the door without a word. I walked behind his massive mahogany desk and saw something that made my blood run cold. Sitting right on top of his keyboard was a printed document. It was my official termination letter, but the date at the top wasn't today. It was dated 3 weeks ago. My father hadn't fired me because of my attitude about Melissa's wedding. He had been planning to fire me for weeks so he could replace me with someone who wouldn't notice him stealing from the pension fund. I sat down in his massive leather chair, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs. I cried out of pure, overwhelming relief. I cried because I realized that for 10 years, I had poured my heart into saving a man who saw me as nothing but an obstacle to his greed. I picked up my phone and called Grant. "Bring the auditors," I said, my voice thick but steady. "I'm ready." By 8:30 a.m., the top floor was entirely transformed. Grant arrived with a team of 4 sharp-suited financial auditors. Elias Thorne had tried to flee, but Marcus had locked the parking garage gates. We didn't fly to Denver to start a new company. We were taking back the one that was already mine. I walked out of the office, grabbed my father's gold-plated nameplate off the door, and dropped it straight into the trash can. In its place, Grant taped a crisp, printed piece of paper. "Jessica Sterling, sole owner and CEO." The auditors immediately set up their laptops in the executive boardroom, hunting down every stolen penny to return it to the workers' pension fund. I sat at my new desk and opened the master banking dashboard on my computer. It was 9:55 a.m. I stared at the screen without subtracting my family's luxury expenses from my own survival for the first time in my adult life. There, in the pending transactions, were my father's automated payments. $15,000 for Melissa's wedding venue, $4,000 for the country club catering, $2,500 for my mother's country club membership. Every month, thousands of dollars bled from the factory to fund a life of fake royalty. Grant leaned against the doorframe. "You know the system will freeze those automatically in 4 minutes, right?" he asked gently. I didn't answer. I just watched the digital clock on the screen. Part of me, some stupid, stubborn part, was still waiting for my phone to ring, hoping my dad would call and say he was sorry for throwing me out. Nobody called. At exactly 10 a.m., the screen flashed. The international hold from Great Aunt Clara's trust fund cleared. A massive, 8-figure sum flooded into my secure master account. Instantly, the corporate accounts tied to my father turned bright red. The pending wedding payments didn't just fail, they vanished. The accounts were officially locked. The Sterling family credit line was dead. 2 hours passed. I counted the minutes the way you count thunderclaps after a lightning strike, waiting for the explosion. Still, my phone didn't ring. Instead, at exactly 12:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. My heart gave a stupid flutter of hope. I opened it. Melissa had posted a photo. It was my old bedroom, the one I had been kicked out of yesterday. My bed was gone. In its place were towering stacks of expensive wedding gifts, silver serving trays, and designer boxes. The caption read, "Finally getting some use out of this depressing room. Cease," my mother commented. "Looks beautiful, sweetheart. Dad and I are so proud of you." I scrolled back through the chat. No one asked where I had slept in the storm. No one asked if I was safe. They were continuing on as if a limb hadn't just been amputated. I put the phone face down on the heavy mahogany desk. I sat there with my cursor hovering over the block button on my phone. I didn't click it. Not yet. Because I knew the storm wasn't over. The real hurricane was about to hit them. I didn't have to wait days for the fallout. It took exactly 42 minutes. The heavy, polished phone on my father's massive desk began to ring. It was the private executive line, the one only used for VIPs. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the smell of old leather and expensive polish fill my lungs. Then, I picked it up. "Richard, what is going on with your accounts?" a panicked voice barked through the speaker. It was Mr. Henderson, the manager of the Oakwood Country Club. The $4,000 catering check for Melissa's wedding reception just bounced. The bank said the account is locked for severe fraud. I held the phone steady, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. It felt like watching the first heavy drop of rain before a massive hurricane. "Mr. Henderson, this is Jessica Sterling, the new CEO of Sterling Manufacturing," I said evenly. "Richard no longer has access to those funds. That corporate account is permanently closed." The line went dead silent before he cursed and hung up. 3 minutes later, my cell phone lit up. It was Melissa. A tiny spark of hope, a foolish, broken part of me, thought maybe she was calling to apologize for throwing my suitcase in the rain. I answered. "Jess." My black card just declined at the bridal boutique. She screamed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. The cashier literally cut it up in front of everyone. "I am hyperventilating. Transfer $2,000 from your little savings account right now so I can pay for these bridesmaid robes." I let her silence hang for 3 seconds. Melissa hated silence. It meant she wasn't the center of attention. "Hello? Are you deaf, Jessica? Transfer the money." "I can't do that, Melissa," I said, my voice completely empty of emotion. "Where even are you?" she snapped. "Are you crying in your car again? Just send the money." "I'm sitting at the CEO's desk at the factory," I replied softly. "And your black card didn't glitch, it was cancelled." She gasped, but before she could throw another tantrum, I hung up. I set the phone down and stared at it like it was a poisonous snake. The very first words my sister had for me, less than 24 hours after kicking me out of my childhood home, were a demand for cash. Not an apology, not a question about where I slept. Just pure blinding greed. That was the exact moment my heart finally turned to steel. I opened my laptop and did what I should have done years ago. I drafted a company-wide corporate memo. It wasn't an emotional family text. It was a strict legal document to protect the innocent workers. "Effective immediately," I typed. "Ownership of Sterling Manufacturing has been fully transferred to Jessica Sterling. All former executive credit cards, vendor accounts, and family expense lines are permanently terminated. The workers' pension fund is now fully secured under federal lock. I didn't add a single emotional word. No apologies, just cold, hard facts. Grant reviewed it, gave me a proud nod, and I hit send all. Every single employee in the building received it at the same time. I knew the storm would hit the front doors soon. And 10 minutes later, the security cameras proved me right. I pulled up the live feed of the main lobby on my computer screen. My father, Richard, burst through the glass doors, his face bright red. He was holding his cell phone, clearly furious about the country club bouncing his check. He marched straight toward the secure executive elevators. He swiped his gold badge. Beep, red light. He frowned, swiping it again, harder this time. Beep, red light. On the screen, Marcus, the elderly security guard, stepped out from behind the desk. I couldn't hear the audio, but I watched Marcus shake his head and hold up a printed copy of my memo. My father snatched the paper. I watched his eyes dart back and forth as he read the words. I watched the exact second his arrogant pride shattered into tiny, unfixable pieces. His shoulders slumped. The color drained from his face until he looked like a ghost. He looked up, staring directly into the blinking red light of the security camera. He knew I was watching. For a decade, this man had treated me like a silent ATM machine, draining my youth to fund his mistakes. He threw me out into a freezing storm so my sister could have my bedroom for gifts. And now, standing in the lobby of the empire he had ruined, he finally realized I was the only thing that had ever kept him from drowning. I didn't feel guilty. I closed the camera feed, turned to the massive stack of real work on my desk, and started rebuilding the company. The Sterling family was officially cut off. The rest of the afternoon in the executive office felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in my life. The heavy mahogany clock on the wall ticked quietly, a steady rhythm replacing the constant anxiety I used to carry. At 3:15 p.m., my desk phone buzzed. It was Marcus at the security desk. "Miss Sterling, your Aunt Pamela is in the lobby. She looks terrified, but she says she needs to see you." I told Marcus to let her up. When Pamela walked through the double oak doors, she looked like she had aged 10 years. She was clutching her cheap vinyl purse to her chest, her eyes darting around the massive, luxurious office as if she wasn't allowed to be there. "Jessica, honey," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I sneaked out while your mother was screaming at the caterers. I had to make sure you were okay." I stood up, walked around the massive desk, and gave her a tight hug. She smelled like lavender soap and nervous sweat. "I'm perfectly fine, Aunt Pamela," I said gently. "But what is happening at the house?" Pamela sank into a leather guest chair, burying her face in her hands. "It is an absolute war zone," she confessed. "Melissa's elite wedding planner quit on the spot this morning because the $15,000 deposit check bounced. Your mother is telling everyone that the bank made a computer error." Pamela paused, looking at me with wide, frightened eyes. "But it wasn't an error, was it, Jessica? You finally stopped them." "I bought the company with Great Aunt Clara's help, Pamela," I told her honestly. "Dad was secretly draining the factory workers' pension fund to pay for the wedding. I had to lock the accounts to save innocent people from going bankrupt." Pamela gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "The pension fund," she choked out. Then a look of pure dread washed over her face. "Oh, Jessica, it gets worse. Your mother didn't just bounce the venue check. She has secretly opened 3 high-interest credit cards in your father's name. She maxed them out, nearly $85,000, for Melissa's designer dresses and a luxury honeymoon to Bora Bora. She assumed the company would just pay the credit card bills at the end of the month." I leaned back against my desk, the sheer weight of their delusion hitting me like a physical punch. They had built a fragile castle out of stolen money, and I had just removed the final pillar. After Pamela left, promising to keep my secrets, I realized I had to face the people who truly mattered. I walked out of my office and took the elevator down to the loud, oily factory floor. The smell of hot metal and machine grease filled the air. I asked the floor manager to shut off the heavy machines and gather all 200 workers in the loading bay for a town hall meeting. They stood in their steel-toed boots and stained work shirts, looking at me with nervous, exhausted eyes. They thought I was there to announce layoffs. Instead, I grabbed a microphone. "My father is no longer the CEO of this company," I announced, my voice echoing off the high tin ceiling. "I am the sole owner now. I know the rumors. I know you've been terrified about your pensions. I am here to tell you that every single penny is safe, locked in a secure federal account. No one will ever touch your family's futures again. For 5 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then a deafening roar of applause erupted. Grown men who had worked there for 30 years took off their hard hats and wiped tears from their eyes. The emotional relief in that room was so thick it made my own chest ache. This was what real leadership looked like. When I got back to my office, my cell phone rang. It was Great Aunt Clara. I heard the factory floor cheering all the way from my estate, she said, a rare, proud chuckle in her raspy voice. You did well today, Jessica, but brace yourself. The wolves will come crying when they realize they are truly starving. Do not let them bite. I promised her I wouldn't. Just as I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text message. It wasn't from my mother or sister. It was from Brad, Melissa's wealthy, status-obsessed fiancé. Hey Jess, the text read. Melissa is acting psychotic about the venue. Her dad's card declined when we tried to buy the wedding bands today. Are the rumors true? Is your family actually broke? I stared at the glowing screen. Melissa's fake fairy tale wasn't just cracking. The groom was starting to realize the princess was a fraud. I didn't reply. I just locked my phone and watched the sunset over the factory that finally belonged to me. The next morning, the crisp autumn wind whipped through the city, blowing away the last of the heavy rain. I was sitting at my new desk, reviewing the health insurance policies for my factory workers, when my phone lit up with a breaking news alert from my own family. Brad had not just canceled the wedding, he had fled. According to a panicked, sobbing voice memo Aunt Pamela secretly forwarded to me, Brad's wealthy parents had hired a private investigator. The PI hadn't just found out about the freeze yesterday. He had been quietly investigating my father and Elias Thorne's fake consulting shell companies for 2 solid weeks. When the investigator found out the Sterling Company accounts were frozen for fraud and the pension fund was nearly drained, Brad packed his bags. He left Melissa screaming in the driveway of our childhood home, peeling out in his red sports car without a single backward glance. But the morning chaos wasn't over. Before I could even finish my coffee, my office double doors slammed open. It was Melissa. Her expensive hair was a tangled mess, and her designer mascara was running down her cheeks. She had pushed right past Marcus. You are going to fix this, Jessica, she shrieked, slamming her hands down on my desk. Brad left me. His parents think we are white-collar criminals. I stood up slowly, matching her manic energy with absolute ice. You are white-collar criminals, Melissa. Or at least Dad is. I don't care, she screamed, her voice echoing into the hallway. You own this place now. Write a legal contract giving me 50% of the shares. If I can prove to Brad's family that I'm a millionaire executive, he will come back to me. Give me my half of the company right now. I actually laughed. The sheer delusional audacity of her demand was staggering. You want half of the company I spent 10 years keeping alive while you bought luxury bags? Get out of my office, Melissa, before I have you arrested for trespassing. She stared at me, her jaw dropping as she realized her tears held zero power here. She turned and ran out, sobbing hysterically. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but when I answered, I heard the heavy, defeated breathing of my father, Richard. He was calling from a cheap prepaid cell phone. Jessica, he started, his voice completely empty of its usual arrogance. I don't know what to say. You could start with apologizing for throwing your own daughter into a freezing storm, I replied quietly. The silence on the line was thick and suffocating. I know I was wrong that night, he whispered. But I'm not calling about the money, Jessica. Brad's family canceled the wedding. We are the laughingstock of the country club. I just need you to issue a public statement saying I am still the honorary co-CEO. Just a fake title, Jess. Please, let me keep my dignity. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart physically aching at how pathetic this man had become. Even now, after losing his empire and destroying his workers' trust, all he cared about was his fake social status. You lost your dignity the moment you decided to steal from the people who built your wealth, Dad, I said softly. I will not lie to protect your ego. I hung up the phone, the quiet click feeling like the final lock on a very heavy door. 30 minutes later, my phone pinged with an audio message. This time, it was from my mother, Laura. I pressed play, expecting her usual screaming insults. Instead, I heard frantic, terrified whispering. Jessica, please listen to me, she begged, her voice trembling. Your father is going crazy. He's blaming me for the credit card debt. You have to believe me, I didn't know he was stealing from the pensions. I just thought the business was doing great. You know how he lies, Jessica. He tricked me too. Let me come stay with you. I can't be in this house with him anymore. My stomach turned in pure disgust. When the money was flowing, they were a united front, happy to toss me out like garbage. But the very second the consequences arrived, my mother was perfectly willing to throw her own husband under the bus to save herself. She didn't miss me, she just wanted a new host to leech off of. I deleted the voice message without replying, to wash the toxic taste of my family out of my mouth. I called Thomas, the grizzled leader of the factory workers' union, into my office. He walked in slowly, holding his grease-stained cap in his rough hands. I slid a thick, legally binding document across the desk. "This is the Federal Pension Protection Act," I told him, handing him a gold pen. "Once we both sign this, neither I, nor my father, nor anyone else can ever touch your retirement funds again. It is locked forever." Thomas stared at the paper, his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the pen. "Bless you, Miss Sterling," he choked out, tears spilling into his gray beard. "You saved our lives." That evening, Great Aunt Clara sent her private driver to pick me up for a formal dinner. Her massive dining room was lit only by flickering crystal chandeliers. After we finished our soup, Clara reached into her velvet purse and pulled out a heavy antique gold pocket watch. "This belonged to your grandfather," she said, placing it gently into my palm. It felt warm and heavy, a true symbol of our family's original hard-working roots. "He built that factory with honest sweat," Clara continued, her sharp eyes softening. "Your father turned it into a circus of greed, but today you made it an honest place again. I have never been more proud to call you a Sterling." I held the gold watch to my chest, listening to its steady heartbeat. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't just fine, I was truly deeply free. The weeks following Brad calling off the wedding were a total public humiliation for my family. In a wealthy town like Crestwood, gossip travels faster than a wildfire. The country club officially revoked my parents' membership, posting a small, polite notice on their bulletin board about unpaid dues. It was the ultimate social execution for my mother. Aunt Pamela told me that Laura now refused to leave the house during the day, terrified she might run into someone she used to brag to. Melissa, having lost her rich fiancé, her designer wedding, and her endless credit cards, had to do something she hadn't done in 7 years. She had to get a real job. Pamela secretly texted me a photo of Melissa working the checkout lane at the local discount grocery store. She was wearing a hideous green polyester uniform, staring blankly at a scanner. I stared at the picture for a long time, but I didn't feel the sharp spike of revenge I thought I would. I just felt an overwhelming sense of pity. They had traded their souls to live like fake royalty, and now they were working checkout lanes to survive. As for Clara's 30-day ultimatum, I didn't just meet it, I shattered it. My life was blooming like a flower finally pulled out of the dark. Under my leadership, Sterling Manufacturing's profits jumped by 20% in the first quarter. The workers were happy, productivity was up, and Grant and I decided it was time to officially relaunch the company under a new name. We planned a massive rebranding gala at the city's finest downtown hotel. It wasn't going to be a snobby country club dinner. We invited all 200 factory workers, our biggest clients, and local business reporters. The night of the gala, the grand ballroom was sparkling with gold string lights, and a gentle jazz band played softly in the corner. I stood near the entrance in a sleek, tailored navy blue suit, feeling completely at peace. Great Aunt Clara arrived in her wheelchair, pushed by Grant. She was wearing a stunning black velvet gown and her signature pearl earrings. "You look like a true CEO tonight, Jessica," she whispered, patting my hand with her cool, fragile fingers. "Don't let anyone ruin your victory." I gave my speech at 8 p.m. I stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of the hard-working men and women who actually made the company run. For years, this company was run on secrets and stolen futures, I told the crowd, my voice echoing clearly through the massive room. But tonight, we are officially changing our name from Sterling Manufacturing to Clara and Rose Industrial. A new name for a new, honest era. The applause was deafening. The factory workers clapped so hard it felt like the floor was shaking. I was cutting the ceremonial cake with Grant when the heavy ballroom doors swung open. The happy chatter in the room instantly died down. Standing in the doorway, completely uninvited, were my parents. Laura was wearing an old, out-of-season designer dress that suddenly looked cheap, and my father Richard was wearing a wrinkled suit that hung loosely on his defeated frame. They hadn't brought Melissa. They slowly walked across the gleaming marble floor, completely ignoring the angry glares of the factory workers they had tried to rob. They walked straight up to me. The jazz band stopped playing. The silence in the room was so thick you could choke on it. "Jessica," my mother said, her voice shaking violently. "We saw the press release about the new name. Clara and Rose. You erased your father's name from his own company. It stopped being his company the second he decided to steal the workers' pensions, I replied smoothly, not raising my voice. This is a private corporate event. How did you get past security? I am still your father, Richard suddenly shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. I gave you everything. I taught you everything you know about business. And you reward me by humiliating us in front of the whole town? You stole my legacy. Before I could even respond, Thomas, the grizzled union leader, stepped directly between me and my father. He was a massive man, smelling faintly of soap and old leather. The only thing you ever built, Richard, was a pile of lies, Thomas growled, pointing a thick, calloused finger at my father's chest. This girl saved our families. You tried to ruin them. Now get out of her building before I have my boys throw you out into the street, just like you did to her. My father froze. He looked around the room, making eye contact with dozens of men he used to boss around. Not a single person looked away. They all stared at him with pure, unified disgust. My mother burst into genuine, ugly tears, burying her face in her hands. But there was no sympathy left in this room. Without another word, my father turned around, grabbed my crying mother by the elbow and practically dragged her out of the ballroom. They didn't look back. The heavy doors clicked shut behind them, sealing them out of my life for good. Grant raised his glass high in the air, his voice booming across the room. To Jessica, to Clara and Rose. The crowd erupted in a massive cheer, and the jazz band instantly struck up a joyful, upbeat tune. I looked at Great Aunt Clara. She was smiling, sipping her champagne. The toxic ghosts of my past were finally gone. The grand ballroom finally emptied out, leaving only the soft hum of the cleaning crew's vacuums and the smell of sweet buttercream and expensive champagne in the air. I sat at a quiet corner table with Great Aunt Clara. She reached into her velvet purse one last time that night and pulled out a thick, folded piece of parchment paper. This is the original property deed to the factory ground, she whispered, sliding it across the tablecloth. I kept it hidden from your father for 30 years. Now it belongs to the rightful owner. Holding that old, slightly yellowed paper, the reality finally settled into my bones. The empire was permanently mine. There were no more loopholes for my father to crawl through. But a drowning man will still try to pull you under. 3 days later, Grant walked into my office with a thick legal envelope. My father wasn't done throwing tantrums. Richard had actually hired a sleazy, desperate lawyer to sue me for wrongful termination and emotional distress. He demanded a $2 million settlement and publicly claimed I had tricked a confused old woman, Great Aunt Clara, into signing the company over. When Clara heard this, she was furious. She insisted on coming to the courthouse herself. We didn't even have to go to a full trial. At the preliminary hearing, the stern-faced judge looked down from his high bench at the mountains of evidence proving my father had illegally stolen from the federal pension fund. Clara sat proudly in the front row, her sharp eyes glaring holes into my father. The judge didn't just throw the ridiculous lawsuit out. He held my father in contempt for wasting the court's time and slapped him with a massive financial fine he couldn't possibly pay. I watched from the gallery as my father slumped in his chair, his fake billionaire persona entirely crushed by the heavy hammer of the law. That same afternoon, the true cracks in my parents' marriage finally exploded. Aunt Pamela showed up at my factory, but this time she had 2 large suitcases rolling behind her. She was shaking, but she was smiling. I finally did it, Jessica, she announced, tears of absolute relief in her eyes. I packed my things. I am leaving your mother's toxic house forever. I immediately hugged her, the scent of her lavender soap bringing me comfort. I didn't just give her a place to stay. I gave her a job. I hired Pamela as our new front desk administrative assistant. For the first time in her life, Pamela was earning her own honest paycheck, far away from my mother's cruel insults. Sitting in the break room, Pamela revealed the darkest secret yet about my parents' crumbling world. Your father was screaming about the court fines, Pamela whispered, sipping a hot cup of tea. He told your mother they had to sell her diamond rings, and that's when it came out. Jessica, your mother has been secretly hiding a private offshore bank account from him for years. She skimmed thousands of dollars off the top of his salary just for herself. When your father found out, he broke a vase against the wall. They are turning on each other like starving wolves. I shook my head, feeling a cold wave of disgust. They had built a marriage entirely on lies, and now they were drowning in them. As if my day couldn't get any more chaotic, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Melissa. I hadn't spoken to her since she demanded money for her bridesmaid robes. I picked it up, curious to see if hitting rock bottom had finally humbled her. "My stupid used car broke down on the highway," she screamed into the phone. I could hear the loud honking of cars speeding past her. "I am going to be fired from the grocery store. This is entirely your fault, Jessica. If you hadn't stolen Dad's money, I would still have my brand new SUV." I didn't yell back. I didn't feel angry. I just felt incredibly tired of her endless victim complex. "I have no money for a tow truck," she sobbed, quickly switching from screaming to her fake, manipulative crying voice. "Just send me $300, Jess, please. I'm your sister." For a decade, that exact crying tone would have made me reach for my wallet. It was a trained reflex. But now that reflex was completely dead. "I didn't steal anything, Melissa," I said calmly, my voice steady and firm. "Dad stole from innocent workers. I saved them. Your car breaking down is your responsibility. Call a tow truck." And then, for the first time in my 32 years of life, I didn't wait for her to finish complaining. I just hung up the phone. I didn't block her number, because I wanted the power of seeing her name on my screen and actively choosing to ignore it. The silence in my office after I ended that call was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I was no longer the family punching bag. I was the unbreakable wall they had finally crashed into. Spring finally arrived, bringing warm sunshine to the city. But the ice surrounding my parents' fake world was only getting colder. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 month after our company gala, my cell phone rang. It was the head of security at Great Aunt Clara's sprawling estate. My mother, Laura, had completely lost her mind. She had driven to Clara's house and actually tried to climb over the heavy iron security gates. She was caught screaming in the rain, aggressively demanding that Clara give her just $500,000 from the family trust fund to save her country club reputation. Clara didn't even bother going outside to speak to her. She simply called the police. I watched the live security footage on my phone as my mother, still wearing her expensive designer pearls, was shoved into the back of a flashing police cruiser in handcuffs for trespassing. It was the ultimate, crushing humiliation for a woman who had spent her entire life judging everyone else's flaws. Then, the real legal hammer finally dropped on my father. The federal auditors I had hired finished going through his fake financial books. The rapid-fire takedown happened in a single, breathless hour. On a Thursday morning at exactly 9 a.m., 2 stern-faced FBI agents in dark suits knocked on my parents' front door. They formally indicted Richard Sterling for embezzling exactly $1,200,000 from the factory workers' pension fund. Simultaneously, halfway across town, a SWAT team was kicking down the door of Elias Thorne's luxury condo, dragging the corrupt CFO out in his pajamas. He wasn't just facing embarrassing public fines anymore. He was facing 5 to 10 years in federal prison. The pressure inside their house became nuclear, and the family turned on each other completely. And that's when Melissa did exactly what my parents had trained her to do. She looked out only for herself. Aunt Pamela called me from the factory break room, totally breathless, to tell me the shocking news. Melissa, while digging through my parents' messy office for spare cash, had accidentally found the secret paperwork for our mother's hidden offshore bank account. Instead of helping her terrified parents pay for a criminal defense lawyer, Melissa forged Laura's signature. She drained the remaining $12,500 from the secret account, packed her bags, and bought a one-way bus ticket to Florida. She left a cruel, wrinkled sticky note on the kitchen counter that simply read, "You guys ruined my dream wedding. I'm out." My parents had spent their entire lives spoiling the golden child, and the very second the gold ran out, she abandoned them without a second thought. I didn't smile at the news. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt a heavy, deep sadness for how broken and empty they truly were. A few days later, my phone rang with a hospital caller ID that made my heart stop. Great Aunt Clara had collapsed in her garden from a sudden, dangerous drop in blood pressure. I dropped everything on my desk and rushed to the city emergency room, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I walked into her hospital room, she looked pale and incredibly fragile, a heart monitor beeping steadily next to her. I sat beside her, tears welling in my eyes. But she reached out and grabbed my hand, her grip still surprisingly fierce. "Do not cry for me, Jessica," she ordered weakly, but with a proud smile. "I am just old. I stayed alive long enough to see you take back the Sterling legacy and protect those workers. My work is done, and you are finally ready to lead." Hearing those powerful words, the last heavy chain of doubt I had ever felt broke away from my soul. I wasn't the unwanted daughter anymore. I was the protector of our family's true honor. By the end of the month, the final domino fell on my parents. The bank officially foreclosed on our childhood home at 22 Maple Street. Because Richard's accounts were seized by the FBI and Laura's secret money was stolen by her favorite daughter, they missed 3 straight $4,500 monthly mortgage payments. I drove past the house on my way home from the factory one evening. A giant yellow bank-owned sign was hammered roughly into the perfectly manicured front lawn. Cheap moving trucks were parked in the driveway, loading up my parents' boxed belongings. They had lost the empire, the mansion, their golden child, and very soon, their freedom. 1 full year passed since the night I was thrown into the freezing rain. The fake world my parents built didn't just crack, it completely turned to dust. 6 months after the bank foreclosed on their mansion, I sat in the cold, hard wooden pews of the federal courthouse. The room smelled of stale coffee and harsh floor cleaner. My father, Richard, stood before the judge, no longer wearing his expensive tailored suits. He was wearing a baggy, bright orange jumpsuit, his shoulders completely slumped in defeat. The judge struck his heavy wooden gavel and sentenced him to 7 years in federal prison for the $1.2 million pension embezzlement. Elias Thorne, crying like a coward at the neighboring table, received 8 years. As the armed guards clamped heavy iron chains onto his wrists, he finally looked back at me. His eyes were hollow, completely stripped of his arrogant pride. I didn't smile, and I didn't cry. I just gave him a single silent nod before turning around and walking out into the bright sunlight. My mother, Laura, met an equally devastating reality. Without my father's stolen money or my constant financial bailouts, she was forced to move into a tiny 400-square-foot subsidized apartment on the dangerous side of town. Her former country club friends entirely blocked her phone number. Aunt Pamela told me that Laura now spends her days sitting by a cracked, drafty window, staring blankly at a fake designer purse she refuses to pawn for grocery money. As for Melissa, she never came back from Florida. The golden child who demanded I sell my car for her wedding venue now worked the night shift at a fast food drive-thru, entirely cut off from the family she abandoned. In late autumn, as the city leaves turned bright gold, the greatest protector I ever had finally rested. Great Aunt Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep at 82 years old. Her lungs simply stopped fighting. When her lawyer handed me the heavy iron keys to her massive estate, he also handed me a sealed, thick parchment envelope. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten note. "You protected the weak when no one protected you, Jessica. The sterling crown is yours. Wear it with mercy, and never let anyone make you feel small again." I didn't move into her giant, empty mansion. It felt too quiet. Instead, I sold the massive property for $4.5 million. I took every single penny of that money and created the Clara Sterling Educational Trust. It was a permanent, unbreakable scholarship fund specifically designed to pay full college tuitions for the children of my factory workers. I made sure no hardworking family in my company would ever have to choose between their kids' futures and paying the rent. Today, I am 33 years old. I stood on the high steel catwalk overlooking the massive, roaring factory floor. The heavy smell of hot metal and honest, hard sweat filled my lungs like oxygen. Down below, the machines were humming perfectly. Thomas, the grizzled union leader, caught my eye from the floor. He took off his grease-stained hard hat and gave me a deep, highly respectful salute. I placed my hand over my chest, feeling my grandfather's antique gold pocket watch ticking steadily over my heart. I am the CEO of Clara and Rose Industrial, and my company's profits just crossed $15 million this year. I don't hate my parents or my sister. I just pity them. They chose the shiny illusion of wealth over the solid reality of family. I used to be their invisible ATM, the exhausted daughter they threw away just so they could store fake wedding gifts. Now I am the unbreakable foundation they crashed against. Boundaries are not walls built out of cruelty. They are the heavy doors you lock to protect your own peace. Holding the key to my own life was the first kind thing I ever did for myself. If you have ever been the invisible pillar holding up a toxic family, the one who pays the price while everyone else takes the credit, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are allowed to stop. Stopping doesn't make you the villain, it makes you a survivor. If you felt the intense truth in this journey, if you've ever had to build a new life from the ashes of betrayal, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We are building a strong community of survivors here, and there are so many more powerful emotional stories waiting for you. Stay connected with us, because your boundaries are your true wealth, and you are never alone in this fight.